Hey everyone, it's Charlie Morgan and welcome to today's video. So a bit of a strange title, how a packet of cigarettes got me to $95,000 a month. I want to preface this video with two pieces of context. The first piece of context is that I do not advocate for smoking. I don't smoke personally, I used to sometimes, but very rarely, and I don't do it anymore. But I wanted to sort of introduce you to a really, really cool idea. And if you stick around to watch the whole video, it's all going to make a lot of sense to you. Because it might seem a bit strange and abstract for now. But yeah, like the business that we run now, Imperium Agency, we started it back in January. Really, we didn't start it properly until February. So in like 10 to 11 months, we've gone from zero to having one of our best months in November, which was $95,000. And that's in lifetime value. So that's in business signed. So in the last 30 days, we've signed $95,000 worth of business, right? Which is kind of insane. And I wanted to sort of explain one of the things that I've done last month that's definitely contributed to this, because there's something I did. There's this little experiment I ran with this packet of cigarettes. It's going to sound really strange, but if you watch it, I promise it will explain. And so I wanted to say I'm not advocating for smoking. I'm not saying like part of your morning routine is you smoke 10 cigarettes or do a cigarette before a sales call or anything like that. It's very different. And I wanted to sort of unpack what I've learned from running this experiment, because if I hadn't done it, I don't think I would have had the success that I had, if that makes sense. And so I wanted to share it with you. It's quite a long one, so we've got about 30 minutes, and it's literally just me talking to a camera. I actually had this idea randomly at I think it was 1 a.m. and I was like, shit, I've got to record a video on this before I forget it. You know when you're sort of half asleep and then this idea comes to you and you're like, oh, I'll write it down. I sort of just got up and just basically just recorded a YouTube video because I didn't want to forget it. But yeah, have a watch and let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll clip it in now. Hey everyone, it's Charlie Morgan and welcome to another video. So today, this evening actually, because it's currently 11 p.m. at night, I want to talk about mindset. Now, the first thing to think about mindset is it's quite a broad and general topic. And unless we get specific and concise with what we're actually going to talk about, it's really hard to actually make progress when it comes to thinking about mindset. Because your mindset is generally split up into a multitude of variables, from heuristics to proclivities to beliefs to paradigms to perspectives, all of these different things, sense of self, all of these things. And it's a very complicated topic to unpack. And so today I want to focus on one thing, which is understanding yourself and figuring out who you really are. And I want to start this video with a quote from Charlie Munger. And this is one of the first, probably, when I think about quotes and specific utterances that seem to resonate and stick with me, this is one of the first ones. And it's basically, to get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. The world is not yet a crazy enough place to reward a whole bunch of undeserving people. And there's a lot to unpack there. And it's a very simple quote, but it's also quite complicated to understand what it means. From when you observe it from its first perspective, it seems quite simple, quite straightforward, as most memorable quotes are. The verbatim of them is quite straightforward and quite easy to remember. But understanding something and believing it is a totally different thing. And I've been meditating on this quote for the best part of 5 or 6 years. And it's only in the last 5 to 10 minutes that I've had somewhat of an epiphany. Now, every few months I have some sort of psychological breakthrough in my mindset, whether it's a certain belief that I break or a certain perspective I take, or a quote that I remember from 5 years ago and suddenly how it ties into something I've just thought about. The mind works in a funny way. So to get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. So let's start with the first part of that quote, because to get what you want would imply that you know what you want. Most people don't know what they want. And it's a very hard thing to know, because if you don't know what you want, then you don't know what you need to do to get what you want, which means that you're basically just living to get nothing that you actually want. And that's a recipe for misery. And it's how most people live their lives, and it creates a lot of animosity towards the universe, and that's how nihilism manifests itself. Now, we don't want that. I don't want that for you. So really, do you know what, actually? To understand what you want means you have to understand yourself. Because when you understand yourself, you can actually start to observe your nature. Because as human beings, we're not very good at knowing who we are. And so today I want to break down an idea that I've literally just thought of that may or may not be accurate, but it resonated with me, and it's given me this real sense of clarity and direction. So to get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. The world is not yet a crazy enough place to reward undeserving people. So to become successful and to get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. And what this means is that if you want something, the way to achieve it is by becoming the person capable of achieving it, not going after the goal itself. It's through personal growth that we see growth in other areas of our life. Any sort of growth you've ever experienced ever in your life, no matter where it is in your life or throughout your history of existence, that growth always comes personally. So achievements and the acquisition of material goods, or the acquisition or the sense of progress that you're making, is really a raw manifestation of personal progress and personal development. And I think that's why it feels so good to make progress, because it's an indication that you're doing quite well and that you're actually improving on who you have been. So how do we do this? Right. So how do we know who we are? Because to become someone else requires us to know who we're currently fighting. Because the thing to realize is that when you want more for yourself, you have to actually let go of yourself. Because who you are, if you were the person capable of achieving what you wanted to achieve, you would have already achieved it. Now, the only variable there to count for is time. If you are currently the person capable of achieving your goals and you haven't got them yet, then you might have not just given it enough time. But in my experience, the time frame over which you can achieve success is very, very, very small if you can actually make the personal change required to actually see the success you want. And so let's talk about this. So we know now that to get what we want, we have to deserve what we want. And the way we deserve it is by becoming the person capable of actually achieving it. But it's impossible to become the person if you don't know who you're fighting, because we have two senses of self, right? And I think it was Jung that realized this, Jungian psychology. And Jung basically recognized that as human beings, we have two sides to ourselves, right? We're very complicated beings, but we can actually boil ourselves down to two types of people, right? I say two types of people, but two senses of self. You've got the future desired self over here. This is who you need to become to achieve the growth you want to see. And then we have our current self or past self, and those two are actually quite the same. And your current self is the reason you're not successful. And Jung would have called this the shadow. It's the part of you that sabotages all the actions you take. It's the part of you that gives into the impulse of desires and avoids the pain of actually growing and seeing success. And so before we can actually start to become who we want to be, we need to understand who we currently are. Because when you start trying to grow and succeed, these two senses of self will start to fight. And all the conflict you could ever experience as an entrepreneur or anyone trying to do anything of any level of success is you'll experience this conflict as a result of these two people fighting. Because if you want to become someone, you have to defeat your current self. Because there's no way that you can get what you want with being who you currently are. Not through meaningful ways. Say you want to make $1 million, right? Sure, if you win the lottery, you don't need to become a different person to do that. But I think it would be quite miserable to have all that money and not to have earned it and deserved it. Because if you give people millions of dollars who don't deserve it, then they become miserable. And you can observe this by looking at lottery winners and how they just end up as cocaine addicts a lot of the time, or it's pretty unfortunate. So how do we do this? Well, the key to doing this is to recognize that you don't have to be who you have always been. That's a very, very fucking powerful thing to realize. And understanding that and me articulating it to you might seem like it makes sense, right? You don't always have to be who you've been. But believing it is a very different story. And coming to terms with the principle and the idea and the heuristic that you don't have to be who you've always been is a very profound thing to do as a human, because it liberates you from this sense of past, if you like. So I've been able to achieve this by going through life as if I'm playing Sims. Right? This is going to sound strange. I don't do this all the time, but there's an element of disassociation that's required for you to understand yourself. Right? What you want to do is you want to recognize that you have the ability to transcend your consciousness and actually observe your behaviors and your actions and your habits and your thoughts from the third person's perspective. Now, this takes years of meditation and practice to actually do, But once you're able to do it, what you can do is when you have thought, when your brain produces a thought, whatever a thought is, you have the ability to actually catch that thought and analyze it and ask yourself why it's there and where it's come from, what purpose it serves. And if it doesn't serve the purpose of you being successful or contributing to the new sense of self that you want to manifest to bring something forward in the world, then you don't actually have to pay attention to it or act in accordance to it. And so a lot of people have thoughts and behaviors that they feel that they cannot help. And they have these compulsive or impulsive action-reaction sort of relationships with their brain, and they don't really seem to have any hold over their own behavior or character. But the ability to separate yourself from those ideas and those thoughts that you experience is probably the most important thing that you can do as a human, because it allows you to start to recognize who you are currently. And if you don't like what you see, that's fine. Because if you can learn to do this and you can learn to observe your thoughts, then you can actually start to recognize that you don't have to be that person, because you can disassociate yourself from it. And you almost want to imagine that you're like, well, you're like, you know, playing life in the third person, like it's Sims. You're controlling your character, right? You're sending them to work. If they don't want to go to work, it doesn't fucking matter. They're going to work, right? Your Sim doesn't want to go and work out, doesn't matter. You're going to make them work out. And so you can start to observe yourself in life as this almost like a video game character. And you can just throw that character into situations that it probably doesn't want to do, but it doesn't matter because you are not the character. You are like, the character is like a puppet, and you're like up here with the strings and you pull the strings on the character. And when it kicks back, you don't care because you're not the character. Now, this might sound a bit weird because there's a level to which if we disassociate ourselves from ourselves too much, then we create like serious psychological issues. So I'm not telling you that you want to go throughout life in the third person all the time, constantly, 24/7, and completely disassociate yourself from your past and some of the beliefs that you have. And you know, you wouldn't want to do this perhaps with your religion or certain dietary habits or any things like that. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that when you have the ability to transcend your consciousness and recognize that who you are is a collection of all the stories you've told yourself in the past, you can start to observe those stories and realize that they don't actually have any efficacy, and the majority of them are not grounded in the truth, and that they probably contribute towards belief systems and ideas that do not help you move forward in life. And so this is the first thing to do. Now, the next thing that I've realized is that human beings have, as a human being, I and you have the innate, and I believe everybody has this ability, we just don't realize it and believe that we have it. We have the innate proclivity and ability towards actually being able to control our behavior and our impulses and our compulsivity and all the bad things that we think. So now, think about this, right? So right now you could get up and you could walk to your kitchen and eat something unhealthy. You have the option to do that. And now that I've mentioned that, that might actually be bringing up something in your mind to think, I'm going to go and get those crisps or that chocolate bar I want. But you actually have the willpower and the choice to not do that. And that's what separates you from every other species out there in the animal kingdom. You have the ability to decide what you do and do not do. Even if you think you don't, you do. And so what I mean by this and how this relates to disassociation of your character is when your character, your reptilian brain or your current sense of self, whatever phrase you want to use to observe whatever that is, when it wants something that you know is bad for you and doesn't contribute towards the end goal you want to achieve, you can quite literally just tell it to fuck off. Okay? So I've been doing this experiment over the past 4 weeks where I've kept a packet of cigarettes in my bedroom in my office. Right? And you might think that sounds like a bit of a weird thing to do. Like, why the fuck would you like put cigarettes? Because I used to smoke quite a lot socially. Actually, not quite a lot. But I enjoyed it, and you know, sometimes I'd sort of indulge and have a lot of cigarettes in one go. When I realized that I could decide whether or not I wanted to when I realized I could decide what my actions were and what I actually did with myself, I thought I'd put it to the test by basically putting a packet of cigarettes and a lighter within arm's reach of me, like 24/7. And when I did that for the first 2 weeks, like every now and then I'd have this thought. Right, I'd have this sort of urge or this sense of anticipation that we experience when our dopamine receptors start to bubble up and recognize that there's a stimulus in the environment that could produce immediate reward. And like I recognized it and it started to really kick back. And I thought, oh, this is that character talking. This is that past sense of self, because I wanted to obliterate the habit of impulsivity and moving towards stimulus in my environment that is terrible for me. And so by to actually do that, you have to introduce stimulus in the environment that's terrible for you. And then you have to have the willpower to basically say no to yourself. So this is like, it's so damn important, because now, like, I used to optimize my environment, and I still do, because, you know, like, if you've got like your notifications on and you've got chocolate in the fridge and crisps in the cupboard and a McDonald's is like 2 minutes away from you, like, all of these things are temptations and they will get you over time. And my environment used to be optimized to the point where nothing bad was there, right? I didn't have like no apps on my phone. I never like, I had all these apps to stop me from getting distracted and remove the stimulus. But then I realized that as soon as I was put in an environment where there was a negative stimulus, I would just, I'd like move towards it because it was obviously there, and I had no practice with actually resisting the impulse. So when you remove all of the negative stimuli, you actually you have this sense of senescence in yourself where you don't actually know, you strip yourself of the ability to resist impulse. And so when something presents itself, you have no defense mechanism against actually going ahead and doing it. And I realized this, and I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to keep the worst thing possible for me within arm's reach for the next 4 weeks, all day, every day. And I haven't smoked a single one of those cigarettes in the 4 weeks that I've been doing that. And now it's at the point, over the first 2 weeks, it was, you know, every hour or so, I'd be like, oh, I can have a cigarette right now. I could just have a quick, you know, work break, or I just closed 2 clients in a row, or I've just done 6 sales calls. You know, and what you can do is you can just watch. You disassociate from these thoughts. And this is a very interesting thing to do, because if you want to understand yourself and your past sense of self, and all you have to do is pick something that the old you wants to do and that you know is bad for you, and put it in front of you and watch what your brain does. And that's how you learn what proclivities you have and what bad habits you have and what thought patterns actually produce, or what thought patterns basically hold you back. And until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. That's a quote from Carl Jung. Because the unconscious is the past sense of self that we don't know we have. And liberating yourself from that by introducing things into your environment that contribute directly to the feedback loop that produces the sense of self that you don't want is a very good way for you to understand what it wants and why it exists. And as there's probably hundreds of beliefs and other things about me that I don't know exist yet on a conscious level, but they exist on an unconscious level and they drive my behavior. So I want you to ask yourself, why did you click on this video? Think about that for a second. Why did you click on this video? What is it about me or this video or your behavior or your past history that's led to you actually clicking the button to spend, 15 minutes and 57 seconds of your time watching me talk about mindset? There's a part of you, there's an unconscious part of you that wanted to do that. And now that I've brought it to your attention, you probably feel quite uncomfortable because you recognize that you've taken an action that you have no conscious awareness of. And every action you've ever taken is probably the same, except from a few. And so this is the first thing to becoming the person that deserves what you want, is to know who you're up against. And if you don't know who you're up against, which is your old sense of self, then there's no way you can beat it, because it's always going to win, because it's like Donald Trump said about COVID. It's the invisible enemy, or whatever he said. It really is. The unconscious is the invisible enemy. And until you make it conscious, it will rule your life. And you'll just think, oh, I'm just an unlucky person. Or, oh, it's just luck, or everything happens for a reason. But it's actually your unconscious mind, because the recognition that where you are right now in life, in every facet, is your doing, is a very profound one. And it gives you a very strong sense of control, but it also gives you a very strong sense of unease. Because, if you're not in a good situation, you don't want to blame yourself. But that sense of denial is the main thing that prevents you from actually making progress. And swallowing your pride and basically like putting yourself through the pain of recognizing that it's actually up to you is unbelievably helpful. Okay. So that's the first thing, right? Is obviously recognizing these proclivities that we have, these habits, these thought patterns, and bringing them to your conscious awareness so that you know what you're up against and you know your opponent. And over time, and if you do this long enough, you'll start to understand how you can undermine your old sense of self and how you can strip yourself of it. I like to sort of see it as, the closest metaphor I could think of in the animal kingdom is it's like a snake shedding its skin, right? Obviously, there's very few overlaps there, but it's the same. The metaphor, the image of that is quite I think the word for it is called ecstasies, ECDYCSIS or something like that. And it means to shed your own skin. And psychologically, we can do this as human beings, but most people don't know that we can do this, right? And it's a very important thing to know, because when you know it, you recognize that you can step into someone else's shoes. And so when I look back at myself, when I look back at 17, 18-year-old Charlie, who was, an apprentice on £3.50 an hour with, really bad habits and basically nothing going for him, except from some very strong, weird sense of persistence. When I look back at that person, I don't even recognize him. I look back at pictures and it doesn't feel like me. Most people live the same 6 months for 100 years and then they die. 100 years, that would only be 50 years of life. But most people get to their adulthood, 25 years old, and then their neuroplasticity seizes up, which means their brain is basically locked into what they currently believe, which you can change, by the way. And then, for 50 years, they just do basically the same thing with the same sense of self and the same character, without the recognition that they can step out of that character and become someone else. But they're not miserable about it because they don't know they can do it. The recognition and the understanding that you can do it creates this sense of discomfort, because now you feel morally obliged to do it. But I think that's the right thing to do, because then the pain actually drives you forward to actually become the person. And so I want you to imagine here, if you look at what you want, it could be 100K a month in your business. I need you to write down and think deeply about what you need to do and what person you need to become to achieve that goal, right? I want to be a billionaire, for example, and I am a very long way away from that goal, perhaps closer than I think, I don't know yet. But I have to start thinking how do billionaires behave? How do they think? What are their mindsets look like? What are their paradigms like? What do they worry about? What do they do on a daily basis, right? The problem with this is you don't want to necessarily step into the shoes of someone that's miles ahead of you. You want to do it incrementally. So I need to think now about becoming a multi-7 and then 8-figure entrepreneur first. And then I can start thinking about doing 50 million a year. How does someone behave who does 50 million a year? How does someone behave at 100 million a year? How does someone behave at 250 million a year? And so it's just a constant, I find it interesting because the story of Jesus Christ, and I'm not a particularly religious person, but the story of Jesus is and all other famous prophets throughout history, because the story of resurrection continues to be quite a common theme. When you think about what resurrection means, it's like dying and then coming back as a different person. And coming back as a different person in a way that contributes to society and takes responsibility and the burden of consciousness and helps people out and does all these cool things, and they become a different person, right? And I think the reason that the story of Christ resonates so deeply with humanity and underpins most of Western civilization is because it speaks to this idea that we can change and that we can become a different person and that we can grow into people that are capable of achieving things way beyond what we currently are doing. Nothing feels better than that, I promise you. But we have to start by knowing who we're up against. You have to study your opponent, and your opponent is you, right? In that sort of when you're trying to chase success, right? It's kind of like you're running towards the goal, but you're also running away from the goal at the same time. There's a sense of self, this new sense of self, this future self that you're moving towards. But then if your past sense of self is stronger than that future sense of self, then it's going to run away twice as hard and you won't make any progress. And this is the thing that moves the needle, everything. This is the main thing that moves the needle in everything, is this understanding. And I wanted to record this video, and I know the lighting isn't particularly great, and I know that it's super late, but I realized this, as a result of doing that little cigarette experiment and remembering that Charlie Munger quote, and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to just sit and rant in a camera for 22 minutes and try and make sense of what I've just actually believed. And you know what, let me see if I can find this here, because I've actually got a journal, and what I'm going to do is read what I just wrote into the journal, because it might help me articulate this point, and I will sort of leave this in closing, because every week I sit down and I basically, I don't journal daily because I just would rather do one entry every week, if that makes sense. Let me see if I can dig this up. So I just sat and this idea just sort of came over me, I was just sat there minding my own business, and this just thought just flew at me, and I thought, right. So I wrote this, okay, let me read this out. So I wrote, the fact that I can control exactly what I do. Sudden urges for ego and narcissism are actually a representation of the old Charlie. I have the autonomy to say no to my character. It's genuinely a choice. Once you become aware of your behaviour and observe the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do, you have the autonomy to decide. As Viktor Frankl put it, between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose. Therefore, whether or not you are successful is merely up to two things. One, your ability to choose the right action in every moment of every hour of every day. And two, the ability to withstand and tolerate the pain associated with this action and the sense of mild despair associated with avoiding the immediately pleasurable thing to do. Because when you have to decide to become a different person and take actions that are outside of your comfort zone, we experience pain. And often, like, the notion of pain is actually just created by, like, not having the pleasure, right? Because we feel like we're missing out. And so you can genuinely pull the strings of your body and character like a puppet. You can decide what needs to be done, and you can make yourself do it. Never forget you have this power. This realization of the idea you have control over yourself is the only form of control you ever need. It's the Stoic reality. No longer are you to be led by impulse, urge, and emotion. These things no longer have a hold. You are able to behave how you want to behave and adapt to situations like water. Understanding the idea you have the control and believing you have the control are two very different things. And so I used to be a man of extremes, right? Where this is like the cigarette thing. Like, I could never just smoke one cigarette. I always had to have like 5 to 10 in one go. And I didn't smoke frequently. And this behavior manifested itself with food, with all sorts of other, patterns of behavior that hold me back and stop me from progressing and moving forward. And so, like, if I couldn't just have like a chocolate bar, I'd always have to have like the whole packet, right? But I would only do that like once a month. But I recognize that it's actually an average, and the regression to the mean of that behavior is actually, if I mapped it out over a week, it would probably be the same, but just in like less density, if that makes sense. And I wrote this about moderation. I've put, you can enjoy things in moderation. I'm talking to myself here. You're no longer a man of extremes. The cigarette experiment is working. This is how you can rewire your brain to anticipate reward and potentially engage in addictive behavior, but choose not to, and not get sucked into the feedback loop of persistent, unhealthy, and irrational behavior. And so this is basically what I learned from keeping a packet of cigarettes in my room for 4 weeks, which is a strange title for a video. I might not title it that, I'm not sure. But it's a pretty profound thing to realize. And so now I'm sort of blessed with this strange sense of control and recognition that I can quite literally, and I'm sure you can as well, but I'm talking from personal experience, and I believe that everyone can do this if they practice. You can literally behave how you want to behave. You can pick a goal and you can decide who you need to become, and you can become that person. And every moment of every day, you have the choice to act in accordance with who you want to be to achieve the goal. And so no matter what the fuck you set for yourself, the human potential is literally limitless, and you can do whatever the hell you want as long as you remember the variable of time, and that the big goals take time to manifest themselves, because cause and effect is not instant, right, when it comes to big things. So that's everything. I thought it was interesting because now, like, I can catch myself. If I'm about to do something stupid that doesn't contribute towards the future I want, I recognize it and separate myself and be like, whoa, do I actually want to do this? Like, I might think I want to do it, but what the past sense of self and character wants now is not what the future sense of self wants, right? And so we've got these two wants, like, staying up till 3 a.m. playing Call of Duty, habit I used to have, right? And so I might suddenly sit down to go to sleep at 10:30 and then get this weird urge to just suddenly play Call of Duty for like the next 5 hours. But I can catch that urge and decide not to do it. And being able to catch it, it's just the most important thing, because it allows you to steer the ship of your own existence and actually decide what the hell you want and move towards it in a timely fashion. Okay, so that's what I learned. And like, these little paradigm shifts that I wouldn't, so this is not a little paradigm shift, this is a very big paradigm shift. I think this is one of those tectonic plate moving moments that really sets you off on a completely different trajectory, that liberates you of a lot of bad habits and bad thinking, that is much more conducive towards success. And I think I'm getting there, right? But I know it's quite a personal topic, and it's something that I may or may not upload this video, but I think I will, or maybe not, I don't know yet. But, you know, talking to a camera by yourself at 11:30 p.m. at night is not the most not the most normal behavior, but it's something that's important, and I want to articulate it to make sure it made sense. And I think after doing that, it does. And I hope this video helps you. And I want you to observe who you are, and I want you to look at your thoughts and check out your behaviors. And after you finish this video, what's your next step? Do you go to those recommendations over on the right and click on something that doesn't contribute towards your goal, or do you decide against that? Because now I've given you a burden, right? I've burdened you with the awareness that you're a conscious being and you can decide what you want to do. And I'm kind of sorry about that, because now you recognize you have this ability. You're going to be kind of annoyed at yourself if you don't do things that you know are right for you. But it's actually having this burden and carrying this weight around consciously that will actually help you massively, more than you could ever know. And so I hope this video is helpful for you. If you like this video, then subscribe, because it means that you'll see more videos that you like. Same way the like button works, right? If you did like this video, just press the like button. And I also want you to comment, right? If you've got anything you want to share, or mindset, you know, anything that comes to mind after watching this video, it'd be good to explore that. Also in the description below will be 2 links. The first link will take you through to a funnel that will explain what we do and how we help marketing agencies get more clients. And you can click that and visit that if you want. Don't worry, I won't ask you for your email, and I'm not going to send you through to a webinar. None of that bullshit. It's a very straightforward video of me talking and explaining what we do and some client results, and there's a calendar link if you want to book a call. And then the last link in the description will take you through to a Facebook group that will basically help you grow your business, which is quite cool. And it's also not one of those shitty groups that you have to answer like a million questions to get in. Although we might add some questions later, but for now it's open to everyone. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like the video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.